Hi, everyone. Welcome to Agentic Marketing Summit. I'm Claire Ebben. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here today. Very excited for this session, Build or Buy, Choosing the Right Path for AI Agents in Marketing. Our goal with the session is really for you to learn from some top marketing leaders about how to customize AI agents, when to leverage proven out-of-the-box solutions versus building your own agents. So my speakers today, very excited. We have Angela Ferrante. She is the head of enterprise marketing at Zapier. And Alexi Hatch. She is the Vice President of Global Growth Marketing at Quantum Metric. So let's kick things off. I'd love to start just with this first question around what key considerations really drive the decision for you both to build a custom agent versus buying an existing solution? And Angela, I'll kick things off with you.
Yeah. So first, just some context on why this is so important. We are in an era where building almost anything becomes possible. We're all seeing the I vibe coded Calendly in an afternoon posts on LinkedIn and Twitter, X every single day. So you can replace a lot of SaaS tools and point solutions. So it's much more important to have a thesis on when to buy versus build. So my North Star on this is build for differentiation and buy for velocity. So if you have a competitive advantage, if there's core IP or workflows where the outcome itself is a unique advantage, great time to build versus buying when you just need predictable ROI, speed, scale. An example for us is we had our annual user conference, Zap Connect, back in September, and we had very specific lead flows for AI boot camps that we were running after that event. We built the solutions that would follow up with all of those different participants because there was a lot of core product data that we wanted to incorporate in. And I think there are three pitfalls I see when people think about, do we build, do we buy? One is cost savings. Now, obviously we care about cost, but when you hear folks say things like, we can save $30,000 on this SaaS tool, I just have to spend the next 2 weeks building this thing. What's the cost of that, right? Is that actually costing you $3 million in pipeline? Guess what? That's probably not worth it. So that cost savings is a big one. Starting too complex. People try to build these really mega systems out of the box. And then the third one, and I haven't heard anyone talk about this before, is not using the agents that you build. Maybe this is obvious, but I think the same way that sometimes you buy a new software tool, you need onboarding, enablement, change management. I see tons of agents that get built are really cool and really high potential, and they basically just get put on the shelf because no one knows they exist. They don't get built into existing workflows.
100%. Alexi, how about you?
Yeah, it's funny. I have almost the exact same kind of thinking and litmus test here. And I say, if it's a differentiator, build. If it's a multiplier, buy. Right? The same thing that Angela's talking about for sure. So, for me, the decision always comes down to the, in addition to if it's a multiplier or a differentiator, starts with speed, integration, ROI, right? Marketing just moves way too fast for really long development cycles. So if you need to show value in a quarter or two, an out-of-the-box solution, an agent is going to be usually the smarter move. And we looked at building our own SDR style agent internally. But the reality was we just didn't have the technical bench to maintain it, train it, ensure compliance. And buying ultimately gave us the reliability, a faster path to market, and the ability to layer on our own unique data rather than really reinventing the entire core system. So, I agree with everything that Angela was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an exciting time to be a marketer in this agentic era because obviously you can become engineers and sort of architect our own workflows and things that we want to achieve. But also there's all of these pitfalls that are almost lying underneath the surface that marketing's never really had to think about before. Almost this gigantic iceberg, right, of stuff. And Angela, you touched on some of these around there's cost savings, but there's also, a potential that you might not even use what you've built. So yeah, it's great to hear you both are sort of aligned in that thinking. Can you both share with us any agents you've built for your marketing team? I know you guys just touched on a few, but I'd love to kind of double click on, any agents you purchased out of the box. Alexi, maybe start with you.
Yeah, sure. So right now, most of where we've chosen to keep our time is really in the buy category. So, and it's really about looking at that multiplication. Where do we multiply what already works? So our AI SDR is an excellent example of that. But where I think like the build conversation is getting more interesting and likely where we'll quantum where we'll invest next year is what I'd call like the new marketing ops layer. Um, anything that's been traditionally like automated with simple like if and then or logic, like account assignment, lead scoring, campaign tagging, QA, right? I think that those are just ripe for an agent. They're just kind of like the ones that don't just follow a rule, they decide based on context. They're more reliable. And then I think the other thing this adds into marketing ops, which is interesting, is obviously there's a very high standard and threshold of quality of work coming out of marketing ops to keep the lights on. But in like a really interesting and almost challenging way, I think agents are actually going to make that even harder, right? Where actually perfection is the expectation because it will be able to catch so many errors. Or if you build the right agents and you're using them, right, they'll give you a way to almost raise that bar even higher where, the standardization and just the overall flow is working a lot better because you have so many things working in the background to make it work.
Yeah, Angela, how about you?
Yeah, well, so you may or may not be surprised to hear that we build a lot of things here in-house at Zapier in our product. So we do AI orchestration, and in our product we have workflows and agents, and you can mix the two, so it's pretty cool. So we've got for both our workflow and our agent product, we also have a co-pilot that lets you describe what you want. So you can kind of say, or not, you can exactly say, build me an agent that reviews my calendar weekly, and then you can watch it build in real time while you sit back and do whatever. So this is a very frequent prototyping pattern for us where we are actually experimenting with things really, really quickly. I have 5-10 minutes in between meetings, and I'm going to try to build something off the shelf or build something for a particular pain point or need or opportunity that our team identified. So I think context here is I think about AI work in 3 categories. 1 is faster, 2 is better, and 3 is just work that was never previously possible that you just never would have done. And that's kind of the really exciting category. For all of those, there are 3 types of agents that we are building internally, or 3 main categories. 1 is executive leverage agents. I can give an example of each of these. For that, we have built this executive coach agent where it scans our weekly calls with our direct reports, or any notes you create about how you're thinking about things and stuff you want to improve on, and makes suggestions for you for an exec. For just improving their leadership, management, et cetera. 2 is team and sort of everybody productivity agents. These are things like a team's an inbox zero agent or something that helps manage your calendar. These are things that like you can deploy across your fleet, your entire team. We call them fleet agents sometimes, but that give productivity to every single person. So we've got templates for the inbox zero agent. That's a fan fave. And then the last category I think about is functional, almost like functional SME or expert functional agents. We have for product marketing, we've got an agent pod of literally agents that work within the PMM team to do things like review competitors, write launch copy. They're always on. They're working while we sleep, and they're connected to all of the important contexts like our messaging guides, our competitive briefs, all of our internal relevant context and docs to help the PMM team do like really specialized great work that previously wouldn't have been possible. So those are some of the ones that we have built. We again have templates for all of those that I can share. And on the buy side, I think maybe 2 examples. One is a support bot, an agent. So we use Ada. We could probably build this in Zapier, but it wasn't a competitive differentiator for us, and speed was important to just get something out of the box. So we went with that. And the other example is Profound. So we use this for sort of like our GEO, AEO, depending on what you want to call it or what the kids are calling it these days, but basically seeing how we're appearing and helping to optimize our appearance in LLM.
I love that. Well, first of all, those product marketing use cases, very exciting for me as a product marketer. I mean, we're starting to do a little bit of that as qualified as well, as just sort of scaling all the internal knowledge that like a product marketer might have and then extending it out to the entire team. But I really liked how you both were talking about sort of building into, those sort of like faster use cases, almost like for internal, kind of like delighting folks, but then buying for more of those like external use cases. I want to talk a little bit about cost now. So how do cost and speed really influence your build versus buy framework in marketing? I know we touched on this a bit at the top, but Angela, I'd love for you to just double click into how you think about this.
Yeah. So again, that I know I mentioned cost savings being a pitfall. That's not to say that you should never prioritize cost savings. Obviously, that's real and that's important. But I think we can get trapped in the, oh, we're saving so much money or so much other SaaS spend. This is so worth it. So that's a big one. I think instead paying attention to the intrinsic cost, the TCO, the total costs of building, and include that onboarding and enablement. Also, just hidden costs and opportunity costs of both decisions. Like if you're building it yourself, is this really a core competency? What else could you do at that time? What level of pipeline, assuming you're in a pipeline driving function, could you actually be delivering? And then another one that I think about sometimes is what unique advantages that this solution provider has or will have are you missing out on? And that one can be real and compounding. On the speed side, maybe related, but just velocity of product improvements. Like if we do this internally, are we going to be able to upgrade this, or would the tool Profound, for example, are they adding functionality so quickly that we would be missing out on and wouldn't be able to compete with our internal version. So those compounding improvements and compounding costs are very real. And then lastly, in terms of just like prototyping quickly internally to get something up and running that you can say, hey, is this going, you can almost use to evaluate as like an MVP, to use startup language, on whether this is something you can maintain and build internally. I think we've got a effort and impact matrix that is really helpful in thinking about how you start, where you start, and how you value the time to build. And it's basically this framework for deciding where to start building solutions. And it's efforts on the x-axis or on the y-axis, and then impact is on the x-axis, and it's at low and high. And that bottom low left quadrant, which is low effort and low impact, is actually a great place to start. And like, yes, I said low impact. I think sometimes when we try to start with the really high impact things, we can make things harder for ourselves. And so like lower the stakes, make it easier, and get something like learn, win, build skills, get something out really quickly. And then you can move over to that bottom right quadrant of low effort and high impact, where you can refine existing processes.
Yeah, smaller wins first, and then gaining confidence as you go.
Yeah.
Alexi, I know you mentioned earlier, sort of just like marketing doesn't have the luxury, oftentimes, especially in growth, of waiting to see ROI. So yeah, can you just touch on cost savings and how you consider that when you build or buy?
Yeah, for sure. I think time is almost always more expensive than software. So like your people's time is just very, very expensive. And so how do you maximize that for them? And so I'm looking at like time to value. So how fast can this agent actually start like driving outcomes, right? Or solving real problems? If we can build this pretty fast and it's going to start delivering those outcomes pretty quick, great, right? If it's going to take a lot of technical kind of implementation and stuff like that, it's kind of less so, right? Because again, that time is really expensive. The thing that I look at is like integration debt. It's like how many systems will need to plug into this, and who's going to own that maintenance, right? Because again, that's another time lever, is who's owning that, and what does this look like? Is this in addition to what they're already doing? Does this replace something? And then lastly, like ongoing optimization. So like who is doing this? Who is doing the optimization of it all? And so that time piece, as I look at a lot, is who is the new owners of all of these things. It's changing the way that marketers work, for sure. I mean, it's flipping everything on their heads, and roles look wildly different today than they did just 6 months ago. And I think it comes down to like, how are people spending their time? And I think that that's a huge factor into the cost of these things.
100%. I think the ongoing optimization is a part of that iceberg that marketers don't always think about. And oftentimes, like if the agent is going to be ultimately owned by IT or another part of the business, you really do lose control a bit over then the life cycle of that agent, or just having to jump through additional hoops every single time you want to, that agent essentially is a teammate, and having to go update a teammate via IT and wait, based on their SLAs of when, their priorities of when they're supposed to get certain things done is definitely a hamper. And then, yeah, time to value, I feel like the days of, 6 months to ROI are over with agents now. It's 90 days or less, I think. And it's great for vendors to, I think, get pushed on really telling that value story. Obviously, it went in a sort of buy consideration, but yeah, it's no more are marketers going to wait around, to see if something they purchased is going to be successful in 6 months or more. I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about personalization. So how do you both balance personalization with these agents and scalability when you're choosing an agentic approach? And Alexi, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, sure. The personalization and scalability is like everything to me. And mostly because for Quantum, we have an unbelievably like matrixed audience. And so we span across so many different buying units, so many different industries. Then you layer the use cases on top of that. I mean, the different ways that you need to personalize to keep your messaging really relevant is quite frankly, in a lot of ways, overwhelming. So it's a massive challenge for our sales team to keep like very, very relevant, and make sure that they're saying the right things to people, because again, we are so heavily matrixed. And so when looking at like what an agent can do is just from messaging alone, right? And I'll talk about our AI SDR for this, right? I mean, it's key because it automatically allows for that personalization and scalability, that is just inherently difficult at Quantum. And so it allows us to have really consistent, personalized touches, because it understands the matrix that's coming through. And so kind of back to like my multiplier, this is also like a force multiplier for personalization. It makes it possible. It makes it doable. And so this is key to me. Our ability on the marketing side and the messaging side and what's going outbound to our prospects, like this is one of the biggest differentiators and values to me is the ability to do this with our audience.
Yeah, scaling personalization with when humans are on task to do the personalization, it just means their output's going to be smaller because they're going to have that time to do research and craft a really great response. And now that agents are here, it's sort of happening all at once, which is crazy.
Far less on like inbox maintenance. Yes. Just like you allow the personalization to happen and they can focus on the more valuable things.
Totally. Angela, how about you?
So I think about personalization and my mind instantly goes to like the vanity personalization that we all see with like yesterday's AI SDR work, right? And so when I think about personalization, there's probably a few ways to think about this in the external context in terms of what we're sending out to prospects, what we're sending out to customers. I think it's really important to look at relevant personalization and say like, what do we actually care about personalizing here? Not, hey, I'm in San Francisco. Have you been to this coffee shop? I hear it's great. Like, I see you live near there. Like, okay, cool. That's personalized. That took some custom work, but is that actually driving impact? So for us at Zapier, things that are really high value, we've historically been a PLG company, right? So we have a lot of self-serve users. Those numbers are crazy. And that data gives us a lot of custom information and signals. So I think when I think about balancing scalability and personalization, and using the example of an AI SDR, amazing. Like the buying an AI SDR gives you a lot of learnings on repeatable engagement across thousands of ICP accounts, a lot of intel on like how that should flow. And then where you can plug in the custom signals, again, for us, product usage data. How many AI tasks have the accounts used? Which users are actually creating the most solutions within their Zapier account? What teams are those users on? How are they benchmarking your AI usage against other teams? Like that can drive some of the biggest impact in terms of response rates, opens, and just value that we're bringing to the customer. So I think like a hybrid of using scalability with like existing infrastructure or existing tools, and then inserting like the key elements of personalization where it actually matters and where it actually brings more value to the customer or prospect is super important.
Yeah, it's not first name anymore. It's more about, okay, marketers we can actually personalize in a way that's much more powerful, to your point about, product usage or other components that, again, a human SDR is not ever going to be able to really achieve, at least not in real time. And so, completely agree. So let's switch gears a little bit. What impact are you both seeing on how agents have impact on team roles and marketing process transformation? I know, Alexi, you touched on this a little bit earlier with marketing ops, but Angela, maybe I'll start with you of just how you're seeing agents transform roles within marketing.
Yeah. So first of all, again, I think we are really in the early innings on this. Like I look at how we're measuring, how we're all measuring the impact of the AI agentic building that we're doing and agents that we're having our teams deploy. And I think most teams, despite, again, all of the posts saying like, I replaced my whole marketing team with AI agents for a week, here's what happened. Most teams are still measuring impact based on activity. And that's okay, right? That's an early goal. You start with activity goals, you move to impact goals. Like that's okay. But we're starting to look at what is the actual impact. Fortunately, unfortunately, a very common metric is revenue per head count. So like this starts to become about efficiency. So when I think about like what are the team skills or what are like the individual skills that teams need to have, you hear lots of talk on creative generalists versus specialists, but I think there are a few themes that are just true regardless of the skills team members need to have. It is more technical acumen, and I put technical in quotes because it may be historically thought of as technical, but you can kind of vibe build your way to anything. Again, I mentioned Zapier has this co-pilot. I don't think that's traditional technical skills, but there is an acumen and a willingness to just go in and figure things out and be bad at something first. Like you're going to have to push it 6 different ways before you find the path that is a big unlock. So I think just like that technical acumen, and then teams built around the spikes of the humans, and particularly creativity. Like in an AI world, having that like human intuition and creativity becomes super important.
Awesome. Totally agree. Yeah, Alexi, how about you?
Yeah, from it's interesting because like these agents or AI, it's not just automating work, it's like completely rewiring the workflows, right? So like agents, they free up capacity, but they're also completely redefining how any marketer is working at this point in time, from how content is being produced to how you're QAing things in the systems to how you're doing research for an event, right? I mean, it's kind of changing it all. And I'm really lucky at Quantum. We made some pretty heavy investments in just like AI enablement really early on of like, hey, use it wherever you can, see what it does, see how it works, see if it doesn't, right? And so it was like, early 2025, every single system and tool had like some type of AI component added to it, right? All of a sudden you saw the little stars up in the corner and saying, try our AI mode or whatever it is, And so for our team, it was like, just try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, that's fine. If it does, great. And so overall, that completely changed how people are working, but it also saved us time by like 80%. Right. We saw a reduction on our workloads go down so significantly. And so it allowed us to, do different things, try different things, manage agents in different ways. Right. And so it is completely rewiring the workflows of teams today, which is fun to be a part of. Also incredibly challenging for sure.
Very challenging. Yeah, go ahead.
One other thing, you're making me think of something that we started incorporating into our hiring practices and our performance management practices, which is evaluating AI fluency and training on it, right? So like we now have a rubric rating from like unacceptable through transformative of how your use of AI, and even have that broken down by department within the company. And it's like, again, a key measure both in hiring and in performance management.
100%. And I think it takes leadership, really making it an initiative. And it doesn't, obviously every company now is thinking top down, but I think within marketing teams, like it just takes, one person to sort of say, hey, I'm really deepening my knowledge here and wanting to sort of drive all of these projects across the board. One thing we're seeing at Qualified is not only like how it's transforming existing roles, but we're also seeing new roles emerge. Like we have on our own team a role that's emerged within our marketing ops org that manages our agent for inbound and SDR, and seeing how that's evolved has been really, really fascinating because that was a role that didn't exist 2 years ago. So yeah, really interesting. I think final question for you both. I know we talked a lot about the risks and just trade-offs when considering the build versus buy question, I guess, for both of you, just for folks that are watching today. Can you just share maybe like the best practices or how you would approach it, how you're both approaching this today, Angela or Alexi? Sorry, I'll start with you.
Great. Yeah, buying always introduces risks, right? Like, I just think that that's a standard. You just have to accept it. That's part of what it is, especially around like data privacy. Model transparency is a huge one, right? Like, where's this data going? What is it training? And all of those different things. And so it's factoring that in. For quantum, we have a new, very robust, vendor review policy at this point, right? Where you're really looking at what is happening with this data, how is AI using it, what LLMs are a part of it. And I think vendors are responding in a really thoughtful way too. They know that brands are now looking at things this way, that yeah, this is introducing risks, that our data could go different places and we don't know what's happening. And so it's looking at those different things that is introducing the risk. When I also look at risk from from a buying or building standpoint, I think there's also risk in setting it and forgetting it. I think that that's happening a lot. And it's like, oh, I'm going to have this agent and it's going to do this work and it's going to be fantastic, without realizing like this is a living system, right? They need tuning and guardrails and like this constant validation. And so in addition to kind of like hey, yes, you're introducing risk by buying or building, quite frankly, I think the actual risk in AI, in buying AI or building it, it's actually abdicating the accountability once you do. It's just because it's built, just because the system is placed, doesn't mean your accountability for its success goes away. It's not a set it and forget it thing. And so I think that that's really, really key, is that accountability is still here, but in a very different way when you buy or build with AI.
100%. Yeah. Angela, any other like lessons learned, I guess,
Alexi mentioned a bunch of great ones, and I think we alluded to some of the risks and pitfalls earlier. So maybe there's like 3 best practices that are coming to mind for me that I will mention. The first one is just having a framework. We talked about this earlier for when you want to buy versus build. There's that trade-off between control and velocity, between speed and core advantages, just mitigating that risk where you had a shared framework for how you're thinking about that internally with an eye towards impact metrics, I think is really important. 2 is, we talked a bit about this, Alexi, you just mentioned it again, is having a plan for making the most of builds, so that one, when you do build something internally, it's getting used, it's not stuck on a shelf looking shiny. And as Alexi, you said, that there is a plan for not setting it and forgetting it, that you're actually dedicating the time. I think one of the big sub bullets I'd put on this one is carving out time for building, not only building, but for maintaining and improving. If you're giving your internal SMEs the flexibility to build, you also have to give them the time and space to do it and to keep upgrading and improving those solutions. Like, this is so important. It can't just be, well, you got to do this too. Like, you have to figure out how to carve out time so that they can do that. And then the last piece that we didn't talk a whole ton about, but Alexi, again, you mentioned a few things around, is having a framework for governance. I think this needs to come from like at an organizational level. This needs to be top down. But there are a lot of components where you need to make sure you're having, we're building something in Zapier's products called, hopefully I can talk about this, called verified context, where, there's loss of source of truth for your brand guidelines, or for, the latest orchestration, messaging, and positioning docs. And so being able to verify which is the source of truth, so that all of your employees and all of your teams who are building can have access to that document, and their agents can have access to those documents that are latest and greatest, is really important. Otherwise, you get like cascading effects of misinformation. And one key piece, I think, of this framework and governance is having a human in the loop where key. Like, sure, agents let humans scale their best thinking, but someone still has to own the judgment, right? That final call, someone still has to be making that. I'm like picturing the gates of heaven or something here, but you don't have that. Then, you're just like, you're deploying and delegating all of your core responsibilities to AI.
100%. It has to be something that is just maintained ongoing and not something that we just set and forget. 100%. Well, perfect. Thank you both so much just for sharing your perspectives and your insights today. It was incredibly valuable. So we really appreciate it.